Today we're talking about how we have already had 2 coronavirus-related cancellations in our businesses.
Taylor Jackson.
Shooting 67 weddings last year.
Taylor Jackson, welcome.
So Taylor, you are well known in this community. You're an amazing photographer.
Welcome to Lindsay's Plant Garden. This is the first time that Lindsay has been present in her own plant garden. Behind us, would you like to give us a brief overview of plants?
For sure. I do have to say that I was really happy that somebody noticed my variegated monstera in one of Taylor's videos. It was the
Shout out to Michael from Petapixel, the editor of Petapixel.
Greatest
spotted
pride.
it, but it was tiny. It was hidden in the back. So.
I know, the greatest pride of my life is this rare plant. Yeah, we've got some beauties in here. I take great pride in this. I'm happy that Taylor has built his entire YouTube following off of this garden.
There's really only one angle you can film in, so if we're filming in this angle, everything looks put together, but if you tilt the camera anywhere else, it's all just mass chaos. So that's why I've chosen the plants. They weren't my brand to begin with, and I feel like, I don't know if anyone specifically associates me with the plants, but I don't know, living.
They think that you are a vital human being. You can grow and create things.
Yes, and there's lots of oxygen surrounding us in this little bubble here.
Absolutely.
Today we're talking about a pretty serious topic, and it is essentially how small businesses and how photographers are going to survive in coronavirus territory, and specifically, I guess, maybe the next 2, 3, potentially months of a lot of weddings potentially being canceled. You've already had one cancellation or move. Tim's had one as well, and I have a wedding April 4th, which I believe is a smaller wedding, so I think it will go forward, but I have a very, very large wedding later in April that I'm just not sure of. So let's get into that topic a little bit. What are your thoughts, your takeaways as of right now, being an entrepreneur that relies on a service industry-based job that revolves around a lot of people hiring you to be around a lot of people? Are you nervous going into this year?
Yeah, I think it's twofold. Obviously, the most immediate concern, I think, for most business owners is the financial impact that we're all going to feel. It's really hard to think about the future and think about growing our businesses and all of that when you're not even sure if you're going to have enough money to pay your bills next month. So that's a really huge concern. But another concern that I've been talking about with another photographer locally is, so if these weddings do decide to go forward and we're not going to be the ones to cancel our bookings with our clients, what do we do to stay safe? Because we're surrounding ourselves. They're only surrounding themselves with 100 to 200 people once. We're doing that every single weekend. So sort of, what are we going to do to make sure that we're keeping ourselves safe, that we're not putting our future clients at risk?
Yeah, and with kind of the time delay that if you do happen to contract this, it's 14 days out. If you're shooting a triple wedding weekend going into another triple wedding weekend, that means you're in the same space as, 6 weddings within the time frame that you probably wouldn't even know.
Right, and then if I do decide to take on the risk of shooting a wedding early April, and end up getting sick from it then. The other thing is with weddings, if people are ill, they're probably still gonna go, right? Like if a bride is sick, she's not gonna not show up for her wedding day. If her family members are sick, they're still gonna come. So that's a really huge concern for me, is the number of people that will put themselves into riskier situations just because of the type of event that it is. But if we do contract something early on in April, there's no real knowing how long it's gonna last.
Yeah,
we could all be sick for the next year.
Yeah, and then also going into the service-related aspect of things, the back-of-house staff at all of the venues that we're going to be working at are also paid daily, and they're probably not getting sick pay if they don't show up to work.
For sure.
So a lot of them are probably going to show up even if they don't feel fantastic. For the most part, at least the venues that we work at, everyone's kind of younger, so I feel like a 20-something can pretty easily handle, like if you feel like you have the flu, you just kind of suck it up, you go to work, you make your money. But while that might be kind of 2 years ago, that's what you should have done, that even if you did have the flu and you're just like, I hate being at work today, you still just go and do it. Mm-hmm. And now if you have the ability to potentially, ruin the next couple of weeks of 200 people, it's a whole nother thing to consider. And I feel like I'm not sure what's going to happen with Ontario. I know that a lot of other states have started mandating basically if you're going over a certain guest count that you can't actually have your event. I'm not sure what Canada's going to do specifically. And I also don't know what kind of time you have on that if you are basically like if your wedding is on a Saturday and Thursday night, they announce that like you can't have gatherings of that size. What do you do?
I think the huge concern here is that everything is changing so rapidly. I watched the Prime Minister's sort of state of the country address earlier today, and even while he was speaking, things were changing. There were notes coming out from our provincial government, there were messages coming out from our local governments as the Prime Minister is speaking, like literally within a half an hour, things were rapidly changing. So one of the things that I do believe is going to happen is that gatherings of 250 people or more in the area that we live will be completely banned. So who bears the cost of those, right? Is it the venue that bears the cost of them? Most of our contracts would state that we're not responsible for events that are canceled for any reason.
Yeah.
But what's the right thing to do? Because my contract for my client that has decided to move their wedding until the fall, my contract says that they're on their own for that they would have to rebook me at my full rate. But is that the right thing to do?
Yeah. And if you want my contract, it's on Patreon. You can
my
sign up
contract's
there.
the same as Taylor's.
But essentially what it would come down to, it would probably weirdly come under the acts of God clause,
Yeah.
that this would be considered an act of God, I guess.
Something completely without we have no control over this.
Yeah, so legally, if you wanted to fight your couples, you would be within grounds of doing that. But as a business owner in a local area, specifically vendors that work at the same venues pretty much over and over again, you want to do as much as you can to accommodate them, but also at what cost to your business that, one, like you obviously can't, if they rebook the same date that you're already booked, you can't really bump a couple out of that spot. But also, how many days do you now free up if it's now April? What if they're like, oh, we're going to do it next April?
Or what if they say we want to do it in June, and June this thing's still not cleared up?
Mm-hmm.
In my case, my client had already been in touch with their venue, which I'm a preferred vendor at, so I have full confidence that they're taking very good care of my clients as well. But they're canceling a wedding that's now 9 days out, right? So the financial implications of this for our clients could potentially be very large if we weren't taking good care of them. I like to think that our clients know how big the financial implications are for us, because my clients are looking at booking for a September date that I still had available, which I absolutely could have rebooked without question. It's on a long weekend that I chose to take off, right? So yeah, was it a bummer? Absolutely. But is it more of a bummer that my bride and groom have to replan another wedding because we're looking at fall, so the time is different, the colors are different, like it depends on how much they want to redo, but realistically they could be looking at a whole new wedding again.
Yeah, and I feel like at least the direction I'm going to push most of my couples in, if they do select a date that I'm not available for and I can't actually be their day of photographer, is to either before or after the wedding to just go out and do like an elopement style thing. I feel like we also work very closely with a couple of officiants, and I feel like all of them would be super down to do maybe even a legal ceremony somewhere just for a small group of people. And I feel like that way there's more certainty in the fact that that event will actually happen, that if you go out to have an elopement and there's 5 people present and maybe some parents or siblings, that you're able to actually, you can plan on that actually happening. Whereas a wedding,
at least it's a
lot more
smaller
people.
grouping, right? If it happens in 2 weeks, by all means, like short of any of those people showing symptoms already, I don't mind showing up to a wedding of 8 people right now. But if somebody asks us to do that in 2 weeks for 200, I'm going to have some concerns.
Yeah. So yeah, it's an interesting time. So we'll see how things go. Maybe comment in the comments below what your plan is or what you're feeling right now, because I feel like the general consensus of not only photographer vendors, but all small businesses down to restaurants locally to really anyone that interacts with people on a day-to-day basis is that it's going to be a very challenging part of the year for their business. And as wedding photographers, specifically in the Northern Hemisphere here in Canada, moving into summer right now, this is kind of like our low point, the point that you don't really make any money. So a lot of us are kind of carrying forward that like June, we're actually going to start making money again, and it might not happen. So it's a very stressful time. So
yeah, I was actually looking at something that Susan Stripling had posted, asking her photographers that she teaches sort of what people are experiencing, and she said that she was really grateful that she had some savings. And I know that that's just not a thing that's realistic at this time of year for us. If we were talking in November about something like this happening, well, we have savings built up, but asking people to have savings through a winter that potentially was slow into a summer that you're hoping is now the time when we're going to be building up resources. The other thing is I shoot a lot of portraits. Taylor doesn't do as many of them, but I do a lot of newborn sessions and family sessions, and I had 3 newborn sessions canceled today. So those are big bookings for me as well. And I'm sure a lot of photographers are also in the same boat, that if you're a wedding photographer, you're probably also a portrait photographer. It was a discussion with my clients and myself. They reached out saying, we know you've been traveling, and we're just concerned, just generally speaking. And I just wasn't comfortable with putting myself in a position. We were just away, and I didn't want to risk going into someone's home without having had at least a 14-day period. It's kind of crazy times right now. So with that said, obviously, if I wanted to keep the booking, I could have hired one of my friends that's a photographer to go in and do it. But I'm also just as happy to refer some photographers that I know and trust to go in and do those sessions for me. But again, it's lost income, and it's income that you're planning on in the off season. So even if you're doing your best, I think it's fair to not beat yourself up if financially you're struggling right now. You could have all of the best laid plans. So don't look at some photographers and say, oh, well, like they've had 6 months of savings, good for them. It's just not typical right now, especially if you're a photographer that doesn't have a part-time or full-time job to supplement it. Or if you're like Taylor and I, where we don't have a partner that has a job that is still paying them to work from home.
Yeah. It's definitely going to be an interesting year, I think. And moving into at least the summer, we'll see how things go. I'm hoping that everything just kind of rapidly recovers, because I feel like most countries have been taking stricter action now, and maybe that might even have gone maybe too far, or maybe in your opinion, maybe it's not far enough. But I feel like at least by doing that, and by having maybe this kind of like weird 3-4 week blackout period, that hopefully at the end of that, we're actually going to be able to come out and just everything can be back to normal. So
that's the hope. I think that's the goal of all the government agencies and what everybody is planning with, the social distancing and everything. If you're not doing that yet, just do it, because it's just not, it's not just about us at this point. It's about the whole picture here. So if you're able to work from home, if you're able to have income in another way, then definitely I think we should all be doing our part to make sure that the incline of number of cases of this can start to slow down a little bit.
Yeah, and I do like that the government has decided upon the have you tried turning it off and back on again strategy for this, because I feel like that's kind of essentially what's happening right now.
Yeah. We just need a redo.
Which is interesting. Yeah. This year has been a roller coaster. So good luck in your business, wherever you might be in the world. Hopefully everything recovers in a couple of weeks, but otherwise know that you're not alone in the fact that everybody's kind of struggling for really any aspect of any photography related income right now, maybe with the exception of commercial if you're into that. So now might be a nice time to, one, focus pretty hard on actually learning and potentially signing up to my Patreon, because there's hundreds of hours of content on there. So if you're able to just basically spend the next couple of weeks, if you are at home or if you're working from home and you're able to just work on your business as much as possible, I feel like that's one good thing to be doing right now.
It also, I think, just puts you into, rather than feeling like things are so out of control, it gives you some level of control. It helps you reel things in to be like
buying toilet paper.
You know what? I think probably buying it to Patreon is probably a smarter option. But if you're an anxious person, I know a lot of creatives are really highly anxious about this right now. Try to reel in the control here. Try to feel like you have some sense of control, so that when this thing does rebound, that you're so prepared and you're ready to hit the market with everything that you have to give it, and that you're able to provide your clients with the best service once the time comes that you're seeing them again.
Yeah, and another thing is that photography is kind of a long game. So even if right now, if you can't obviously set up a portrait session for next week to book 10 couples in or 10 families in. If you did open that 10 sessions up to a time in September and you gave it a pretty good, nice discounted rate, you'd probably fill that calendar up pretty quickly. So remember, long game, that you can take those deposits to get you through at least the next couple of weeks to hopefully come out the other side and spend that time learning and understanding, I guess, more about the happiness of your business and how to create a happier business, and also just how to make a more efficient business as well.
One of the other things that I love about being part of Patreon is that there's a really great community of other people that are feeling the same way that you're feeling. Like I mentioned, I am an anxious person. I really don't like when things are outside of my control, but knowing that there are other photographers that are going through the same stuff. Obviously, it's been nice to chat with Taylor about it, but if you're able to get onto Patreon and into Taylor's Facebook group with the other patrons, it's so helpful to just chat things through. People have really great ideas about ways that you could be spending your time right now, like really tangible, specific ideas of how you could be spending your time. So yeah, honestly, now is a really good time to lean into those relationships rather than feeling isolated and alone at home.
Yeah. All right. We'll see you next time from the Plant Garden here in Waterloo, Ontario, Canada.